Hey everyone, welcome back to The New Critic, and today we're going to be looking at Season 2 of The Walking Dead. So, following Season 1, Rick Grimes and his group of survivors must continue to make their way through the zombie apocalypse. Along the way they stumble upon a farm owned by Herschel Green, and while things may appear to be safe at first, relationships are tested, conflicts arise, and shit hits the fan. So back when this season first debuted in 2011, it wasn't as well received as it is today, and that's mainly because I'm just gonna get this out the way for those of you that haven't seen the season. The entire season takes place on a farm. Just remember that going in. Now, considering how fast-paced season 1 was, it took place in Atlanta and it had about 6 episodes. Things are going to be different from season 2 onwards. That's not entirely a bad thing. I mean, you may not appreciate the slower pace of the later seasons, but going back and rewatching season 2 is something I highly recommend, just to remind you of how much the show has changed. Now, the season can be kind of boring at times upon the first viewing, but you'll want to go back and rewatch every single episode, regardless of how they played out. So it has a very significant amount of replay value compared to some of the later seasons. The character development was probably at its best in the series, in my opinion. We got to see more of the conflict between Shane and Rick, based on certain factors such as their leadership of the group, among other things, of course. Carl, Rick's son, wants to learn how to use a gun this season, and Rick and Lori are having arguments about that because it's not safe, and he's a small boy. He's like 11 or 12 in this season. We got to see a softer side to Daryl Dixon, and something happens to Carol that changes her forever. I also liked Herschel and Dale's conflicting views about the virus and the apocalypse and so on. By the way, Herschel was played by the late great Scott Wilson, may he rest in peace. Herschel's daughter Maggie is introduced in this season, and her interactions with a certain character who I won't mention because I want you to see it for yourself, but her interactions with a certain character are some of the best of the season. One thing you'll notice is that it does feel like there were some budget cuts made to the season. It does feel somewhat cheaper. It still has top-notch production values, but it's noticeable, and the reason for this is the original showrunner for season 1, Frank Darabont, was fired due to creative differences. For seasons 2 and 3, we had Glenn Mazzara as the showrunner, and I think he did a great job, considering season 1 was a tough act to follow. Just like the pilot episode, the season 2 premiere is about an hour long, but it wastes no time in reintroducing us to the characters and establishing everything that needs to be established for this season. The mid-season finale is probably the most shocking mid-season finale to this day, and I don't think any mid-season finale in the entire series has ever been able to top that. The zombies, they're good as usual. There's one particular zombie design that's pretty distinct from the others, and it's around the farm somewhere, but there's no guarantee that Herschel and his family are 100% safe from the zombies. Another thing I forgot to mention about the zombies is that no character on the show has ever referred to them as zombies. Some people call them biters, eaters, growlers, mob, infected, dead, undead, and most notably, walkers. Season 2 feels very different from season 1 for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's 13 episodes, so it's much longer and much slower paced. Secondly, it's focusing on an entire group from the get-go, rather than just Rick. Thirdly, it has a lot of emphasis on character development, and I think that's what really encouraged people to rewatch this season, because given the fact that the show is in its 10th season, not all of these characters are still alive by this point, and the ones that are gone will forever be missed. And lastly, it's because it all takes place in one location compared to season 1. The finale really made up for the lack of action this season and ends on an interesting cliffhanger for season 3. And yes, there's plenty more of Carl. The Walking Dead. Next time we're going to be looking at season 3, and that'll be exciting to talk about. So thank you all for watching. Please be sure to like the video, share it and subscribe, and hit the notification icon. Be safe during this time, and I'll see you soon.